The distant sound of hooves pounding against the dusty terrain echoed through the open valley as Eleanor Adams stared out the window of her father's failing general store. It was 1878 in Yuma, Arizona Territory, and her life was about to change forever, not by choice, but by circumstance as crushing as the summer heat that baked the desert town. "I ain't got no other way to pay," her father's voice cracked from the back room, followed by the cold, calculated response of Fletcher Williams, the local loan shark who'd been financing her father's failing business for years. "Then the arrangement stands. Your daughter for the debt. Quinn Blackett gets what he's owed, and I get my money." Eleanor's heart sank as she pressed herself against the wall, her round frame shaking. At 22, she'd grown accustomed to the whispers that followed her through town, the unmarried, overweight daughter of a desperate man. She'd known things were bad, but never imagined she'd become currency. The door to the back room swung open and her father emerged, eyes bloodshot and downcast. "Eleanor, pack your things. You're going to stay at the Blackett Ranch." His voice trembled as he spoke, unable to meet her gaze. "Papa, what have you done?" she whispered, already knowing the answer. "I'm sorry, child. I'm so sorry." The next morning, Fletcher's men arrived with a wagon. Eleanor climbed aboard, her modest possessions packed in a single trunk, her body encased in her best dress, a navy blue cotton that strained at the seams. She'd spent the night alternating between tears and disbelief, wondering what awaited her at the ranch of a man she'd only glimpsed from afar. Quinn Blackett was a legend in Yuma County, a former Texas Ranger turned rancher who'd built an empire from dust and determination. His cattle operation stretched across thousands of acres, and his name commanded respect throughout the territory. But what did such a man want with her? The journey to the Blackett Ranch took nearly 3 hours under the punishing Arizona sun. When they finally arrived, Eleanor was led to the main house, a substantial 2-story structure that stood in stark contrast to the modest homes in town. Fletcher dismounted and roughly helped her down. "Remember, girl, you're here to work off your father's debt. Blackett paid good money." A tall figure emerged from the house, silhouetted against the afternoon light. Quinn Blackett stood on the porch, his weathered hat pulled low over his eyes. He was younger than Eleanor had expected, perhaps 30, with broad shoulders and a face bronzed by years under the sun. "This is her?" he asked, his voice carrying across the yard. "This is Adam's daughter," Fletcher confirmed, nudging Eleanor forward. "As agreed." Eleanor kept her eyes down, shame burning her cheeks as Quinn descended the steps and approached. She felt his gaze appraising her, taking in her size, her downturned face, the nervous way her hands twisted her handkerchief. "Miss Adams," Quinn said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "Look at me." Reluctantly, she raised her eyes to meet his. They were a startling blue against his sun-darkened skin, and there was something in them she hadn't expected, not cruelty or lust, but a deep, considering thoughtfulness. "Fletcher, you and your men can go now," Quinn said, not taking his eyes off Eleanor. "But the papers are between me and Mr. Adams. Our business is concluded." Fletcher hesitated, then nodded curtly. "She's your problem now, Blackett." With that, he and his men mounted up and rode away, leaving Eleanor alone with the rancher. Quinn studied her for a long moment, then gestured toward the house. "Come inside, Miss Adams. We have matters to discuss." Eleanor followed him into a spacious, well-appointed home that spoke of modest wealth carefully managed. He led her to a sitting room and motioned for her to take a seat. Instead of sitting opposite her, he remained standing, hands resting on the back of a chair. "Your father owes me a considerable sum," he began without preamble. "He borrowed to keep his store afloat after last year's drought affected everyone's buying power, When he couldn't repay, Fletcher offered me this arrangement. Eleanor swallowed hard. What exactly is this arrangement, Mr. Blackett? Fletcher believes I've purchased you to work off your father's debt cooking, cleaning, whatever else a man might want from a woman on a lonely ranch. His jaw tightened. That's not why I agreed to this. Confusion mixed with fear in Eleanor's expression. I don't understand. Quinn moved to the window, looking out at his land. I know what it's like to be treated as property, Miss Adams. My mother was indentured to a family in Texas before I was born. I've never forgotten what that did to her spirit. He turned back to face her, and Eleanor saw something fierce in his expression. You're free to go if that's what you want. I'll consider your father's debt paid regardless. Or you can stay here, work as my housekeeper for a fair wage, and I'll help you build a life of your own. The choice is yours. Eleanor stared at him, disbelief written across her features. You're releasing me. You were never mine to keep, he said simply. You're free now or stay. It's your decision. Eleanor sat in stunned silence. Freedom unexpected and unearned lay before her. Yet where would she go? Back to town, to the whispers and pity, to her father's failing business and the creditors who would eventually return. If I stay, she said carefully, as your housekeeper, only as my housekeeper, he confirmed. You'll have your own room, fair pay, and the respect due any employee of this ranch. Nothing more will be expected of you. Eleanor studied him, searching for deceit and finding none. Why would you do this? Pay my father's debt and ask nothing in return, a shadow crossed Quinn's face. Let's just say I'm balancing accounts that have nothing to do with you or your father. Will you stay? After a moment's consideration, Eleanor nodded. Yes, Mr. Blackett, I'll stay. Good. He nodded briskly. Mrs. Thornton, my cook, will show you to your room. You'll start tomorrow. As he left the room, Eleanor sat in bewilderment, wondering what twist of fate had brought her here and what the future held on the Blackett ranch. The first weeks at the ranch passed in a blur of hard work and adjustment. Eleanor rose before dawn each day to help Mrs. Thornton prepare breakfast for Quinn and his ranch hands. The older woman was stern but fair, teaching Eleanor the rhythms of the household without unnecessary harshness. Mr. Blackett runs a tight operation, Mrs. Thornton explained as they kneaded bread dough together. Been with him since he bought this place 5 years ago. Never seen him mistreat a soul man, woman, or beast. He seems complicated, Eleanor ventured. Mrs. Thornton's weathered hands paused. He's a good man with ghosts at his heels. Best leave it at that. Quinn himself remained something of a mystery. He was often gone from dawn till dusk, riding the boundaries of his property or working alongside his men. When their paths crossed, he was unfailingly polite but maintained a careful distance. One evening, nearly a month after her arrival, Eleanor was returning from the clothesline with a basket of dried linens when she heard piano music drifting from the study. Curious, she paused outside the door, listening to the melancholy tune. The music stopped abruptly. You can come in, Miss Adams. Embarrassed at being caught eavesdropping, Eleanor pushed open the door. Quinn sat at a small, upright piano in the corner of his study, a glass of whiskey on top of the instrument. I didn't know you played, she said. Not well, he admitted. My mother taught me when I was a boy. It reminds me of her. He closed the lid over the keys. Did you need something? No, I was just passing by. The music was beautiful. He looked almost embarrassed. It's the only piece I remember completely. He gestured to a chair. How are you finding your work here? Eleanor sat, smoothing her skirt over her thighs. It's challenging but satisfying. Mrs. Thornton is an excellent teacher. And the men have been respectful. Yes, very much so, though I notice they're careful around me. Quinn's mouth quirked. That's because Pedro told them he'd personally break the fingers of anyone who made you uncomfortable. Eleanor's eyes widened. Pedro. The foreman. He has 3 daughters of his own. Quinn leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Miss Adams, Eleanor, please, if I'm to stay here as your employee, he nodded. Eleanor, I want to be certain you don't regret your decision to remain here. I don't, she said honestly. Though I'm curious why you've gone to such lengths for a stranger. Quinn was silent for a long moment, turning his glass slowly between his fingers. I came to Arizona to escape certain memories, he said finally. But some burdens can't be outrun. When Fletcher proposed this arrangement, I saw a chance to prevent someone else from being treated as property. He looked up, meeting her eyes. That's all. But Eleanor sensed there was much more that he wasn't saying. As summer stretched into fall, Eleanor found herself settling into life at the ranch. Her duties expanded beyond housekeeping as she discovered untapped talents. She had a way with figures and began helping Quinn with the ranch's accounts, organizing his chaotic record-keeping into orderly ledgers. You've saved me hours of frustration, he told her one evening as they reviewed the quarter's profits. Where did you learn bookkeeping? I helped my father at the store, she explained, pleased at his approval. Numbers make sense to me. These evening sessions in his study became a regular occurrence. Initially, they spoke only of business, but gradually, conversation drifted to other topics: books they'd read, places they'd seen, memories of childhood. Eleanor found herself looking forward to these quiet hours. Quinn was well-read and thoughtful, with insights that challenged her own. More surprising was his dry humor, which emerged when his guard was down. One night, as autumn winds rattled the windows, Quinn shared more about his past than he had before. My father was a no-account drifter who abandoned my mother when she was carrying me, he said, staring into the fire. She was working off a debt to a family in Galveston. They worked her nearly to death, even through her pregnancy. Eleanor's heart ached at the matter-of-fact way he described such hardship. How did you escape that life? She ran away when I was 8. We made it to Dallas, where she found work as a seamstress. She saved every penny to ensure I got an education. His voice softened. She died of consumption when I was 19. After that, I joined the Rangers, thinking I could bring some justice to the world. Did you? Quinn's expression darkened. Sometimes. Not often enough. He shook himself as if dispelling unwanted memories. What about you? What dreams did you have before your father's death? Eleanor looked down at her hands. Nothing extraordinary. I wanted to marry, have children. But as I grew older and larger, those dreams seemed increasingly unlikely. Because of your size? Quinn asked bluntly. Eleanor flushed. Men in Yuma prefer women who are daintier. Men in Yuma are fools, Quinn said simply, rising to add another log to the fire. The statement hung in the air between them, neither acknowledging the compliment nor its implications. As winter approached, bringing cooler temperatures to the desert, Eleanor found herself watching Quinn when he wasn't aware, observing the gentle way he treated his horses, how he knew every ranch hand by name and asked after their families, the quiet authority he carried without cruelty. She also noticed the dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights, and how he sometimes stared into the distance, seeing something or someone that wasn't there. Her feelings toward him were changing, evolving from gratitude to something deeper and more complicated. It frightened her, this growing attachment to a man who had shown her kindness but nothing more. The first winter storm caught everyone by surprise. Rain fell in torrents, turning the desert to mud and swelling the nearby creek to dangerous levels. Quinn and most of the hands were out moving cattle to higher ground when the weather worsened. By nightfall, with the men still not returned, Eleanor stood anxiously at the window, watching lightning split the sky. "They know what they're doing," Mrs. Thornton reassured her. Mr. Blackett wouldn't take foolish risks. But when midnight came and passed with no sign of the men, Eleanor's worry grew. She was stoking the fire in the main room when the door finally burst open, admitting Quinn and 3 others, all drenched and mud-splattered. "Pedro's hurt," Quinn said tersely. "His horse slipped crossing the creek. We need hot water and bandages." Eleanor sprang into action, gathering supplies while the men carried their foreman to a bunk in the ranch hand's quarters. Pedro's leg was clearly broken, the bone pushing against the skin in an unnatural angle. "We need to set it before we can move him to town for the doctor," Quinn said grimly. Eleanor had helped the town doctor once when a child had fallen from a wagon. "I've assisted with setting bones before," she offered. Quinn looked at her with surprise, then nodded. "Show me what to do." Together they worked to straighten Pedro's leg, the foreman biting down on a leather strap to keep from screaming. Eleanor's hands remained steady as she guided Quinn through fashioning a splint from boards and torn sheets. "You did well," Quinn told her afterward, as they washed blood from their hands in a basin outside the bunkhouse. "Pedro might have lost that leg without proper setting." "Will you still take him to town?" Quinn nodded. "At first light, if the rain lets up, the rest of the men will stay with the herd." "You look exhausted," Eleanor observed. "You should rest while you can." He gave her a weary smile. "I will, thank you, Eleanor." It was the first time he'd used her name without the formality of Miss Adams, and something in the way he said it made her heart skip. Quinn departed at dawn with Pedro in a wagon, leaving Eleanor to manage the ranch in his absence. He returned 3 days later, bringing news that the doctor believed Pedro would recover fully with time. "You've kept everything running smoothly," he noted, surveying the ranch yard. "Better than I could have hoped." "Mrs. Thornton and I managed," Eleanor said, pleased at his approval. "Though one of the hands had to help me with the account books, my figures didn't match yours." Quinn led his horse toward the barn, Eleanor falling into step beside him. "That's because I've been skimming some profits off the books." She stopped short. "Whatever for?" He glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. "I've been buying parcels of land to the north through a proxy. There's a railroad survey team looking at routes through the territory. If they choose the northern route, that land will increase tenfold in value. And if they don't?" He shrugged. "Then I have more grazing land. Either way, it's a calculated risk." Eleanor was impressed by his foresight. "You're a shrewd businessman, Mr. Blackett." "Quinn," he corrected. "After what we've been through these past days, I think we can dispense with formalities, don't you?" The winter months brought a different rhythm to ranch life. With less outdoor work possible during the cold spells, Quinn spent more time at the house, often in Eleanor's company. They fell into a comfortable routine: shared meals, evening conversations by the fire, occasional games of chess that Eleanor usually won. "You're too cautious," she told him after claiming his king one evening. "You sacrifice pieces unnecessarily to protect your position." "A flaw in chess and in life," he admitted, "though caution has kept me alive this long." "There's a difference between caution and fear," Eleanor observed, resetting the board. Quinn's hand stilled. "And what am I afraid of in your estimation?" The directness of his gaze made her bold. "The same thing most people fear: being wounded in a way that can't be mended." He was silent for so long that Eleanor feared she'd overstepped. Then, quietly, "You see too much, Eleanor Adams. Only what you allow me to see." Their relationship shifted subtly after that night, a greater ease between them, fewer carefully maintained boundaries. Quinn began teaching Eleanor to ride, selecting a gentle mare for her lessons. "I'm too heavy," she protested when he first proposed the idea. "I'll break the poor creature's back." "Nonsense," Quinn said firmly. Daisy here carried me and a full-grown buck last hunting season. She's stronger than she looks. His eyes held hers. As are you. Her size had always been a source of shame, but Quinn never made her feel unwieldy or unattractive. Instead, he seemed to appreciate her as she was her quick mind, her capable hands, her quiet strength. During one riding lesson, as they stopped to rest by a creek, Quinn asked a question that had clearly been on his mind. Why did your father never arrange a marriage for you? It's common enough in these parts. Eleanor trailed her fingers through the cold water. He tried once, when I was 18, the son of a rancher in Phoenix. What happened? The young man took one look at me and told his father he'd rather remain unmarried. She kept her voice matter of fact, though the memory still stung. After that, Papa didn't try again, and neither did I. Quinn's jaw tightened. Some men are blind to true value when it stands before them. And you, she asked, surprised by her own boldness, why have you never married? A shadow crossed his face. I was engaged once in Texas. She was the daughter of my commanding officer in the Rangers. What happened to her? She died, he said simply. During a raid on our camp by men I'd been hunting, they came for me but found her instead. His voice was flat, emotionless, but Eleanor saw the pain in his eyes. After that, I left the Rangers and came west. I didn't trust myself to protect anyone I cared for. That wasn't your fault, Eleanor said gently. Wasn't it? His gaze was distant. I knew the risks of my work, yet I brought her into it. Eleanor moved closer, laying a hand on his arm. You can't live your life afraid to care for people because you might lose them. His eyes met hers, something vulnerable and unguarded in their depths. Perhaps you're right. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken feelings. Then Quinn cleared his throat and stepped back. We should head back before dark. As they rode home, Eleanor wondered if she'd imagined the look in his eyes, or if Quinn Blackett might be starting to see her as more than an employee he'd rescued from an unfortunate situation. Spring arrived with an explosion of wildflowers across the desert and a flurry of activity on the ranch. Calving season meant long hours for everyone, including Eleanor, who found herself helping deliver a difficult birth one night when the hands were occupied elsewhere. Quinn found her in the barn afterward, covered in blood and other fluids but triumphant as the newborn calf nursed from its exhausted mother. Mrs. Thornton said you'd been out here for hours, he said, taking in the scene. You should have called for help. The mother was struggling, and everyone was busy with that breech birth in the north pasture. Eleanor wiped her hands on a relatively clean patch of her apron. Besides, I grew up in a general store. You'd be surprised what I've helped birth behind the counter when no doctor was available. Quinn's expression was unreadable in the lantern light. You continue to surprise me, Eleanor Adams. Is that good or bad? Good, he said softly. Definitely good. Later that week, a letter arrived from Yuma. Eleanor recognized her father's handwriting and tore it open eagerly. The news was better than she dared hope. Her father had secured a loan from a bank in Tucson to revitalize his store, one with fair terms and a reasonable repayment schedule. He was doing well and missed her terribly. She shared the news with Quinn that evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. That's wonderful news, he said. You must be relieved. I am, she agreed, though her happiness was tempered by a new uncertainty. He asks if I'll return now that his situation has improved. Quinn was silent for a moment. Will you? Eleanor studied his profile, wondering what he was thinking. I'm not sure. My life there was different. Here I've found purpose, independence. You have a place here as long as you want it, Quinn said. Your work has become invaluable to the ranch. Only her work, Eleanor wondered. Was that all she was to him, a valuable employee? "I'll consider my options," she said carefully. "No need to decide immediately." The arrival of a railroad survey team in May brought excitement to the region. Quinn's gamble on the northern parcels of land looked increasingly promising, as the surveyors spent days taking measurements and making notes. "If they choose that route, we could expand significantly," he told Eleanor as they reviewed the ranch's finances one evening. "Perhaps even build a proper house to replace this old place." "I like this house," Eleanor protested. "It has character." Quinn smiled. "And drafty windows and a sagging roof. But if you're fond of it, perhaps we could just expand it instead." The way he said, "we" made Eleanor's heart flutter. Did he see her as part of the ranch's future? Or was it merely a figure of speech? Her uncertainty was heightened a few days later when a visitor arrived, Sophia Martinez, the daughter of a wealthy rancher from northern Arizona. She was beautiful in a delicate way, with glossy dark hair and a tiny waist that Eleanor couldn't help but envy. "Quinn and I are old friends," Sophia explained at dinner, her smile dazzling. "Our families have known each other for years." The way she looked at Quinn made it clear their relationship had been, or she wished it to be, more than friendship. Eleanor felt a stab of jealousy, immediately followed by shame. What claim did she have on Quinn's affections? After dinner, Eleanor excused herself early, retreating to her room to wrestle with emotions she had no right to feel. Through her open window, she heard Quinn and Sophia talking on the porch below. Sophia's musical laughter, Quinn's deeper responses. "You should have written to tell me you were coming," Quinn was saying. "And missed the look of surprise on your face," Sophia teased. "Besides, Father has been urging me to check on his investment. He still can't believe you convinced him to buy that worthless-looking land up north. It won't be worthless if the railroad comes through. And if it doesn't, we both lose a considerable sum." There was a pause, then Sophia's voice turned softer. "I've missed you, Quinn. Tucson is dreadfully boring without you." Eleanor moved away from the window, not wanting to eavesdrop further. The knowledge that Quinn had been to Tucson recently, presumably to see Sophia, stung more than it should have. Sophia stayed 3 days, during which Eleanor made herself scarce, throwing herself into work and avoiding meals when possible. On the morning of Sophia's departure, Eleanor was hanging laundry when Quinn approached. "You've been avoiding me," he said without preamble. "I've been busy," she countered, not meeting his eyes. "And I didn't want to intrude on your time with Miss Martinez." "Sophia is the daughter of a business associate," Quinn said. "Nothing more." "That's not how she sees it," Eleanor observed, pinning a sheet to the line with more force than necessary. "Perhaps not," he conceded, "but her feelings are not mine." Eleanor finally looked at him. "And what are your feelings, Quinn?" His expression softened. "Complicated, cautious." He took a step closer, increasingly certain. "Of what?" "That some risks are worth taking." He reached out, his hand hovering near her face but not quite touching. "I've been afraid for a long time, Eleanor, afraid to care too deeply for someone again, afraid of the pain that might follow." Eleanor's heart raced. "And now I find myself more afraid of never knowing what might be possible." His voice was low, intimate. "With you." Before she could respond, a commotion from the ranch yard interrupted them, riders approaching at speed. Quinn stepped back, the moment broken. "We'll continue this conversation later," he promised, then strode toward the incoming riders. The riders brought alarming news: rustlers had hit a neighboring ranch overnight, driving off nearly 50 head of cattle. The rancher had been shot when he tried to intervene and was not expected to survive. "They'll be looking for isolated herds," Quinn said grimly. "We need to bring our cattle in closer to the ranch house and double the night guards." For the next week, The threat of rustlers kept everyone on high alert. Quinn spent most nights riding patrol with his men, returning at dawn exhausted but determined. Eleanor worried constantly, jumping at every distant sound. "He knows what he's doing," Mrs. Thornton reassured her. "He wasn't just any ranger, he was one of their best trackers." "That doesn't make him bulletproof," Eleanor fretted. The older woman gave her a knowing look. "You care for him." It wasn't a question, but Eleanor answered anyway. "More than I should. Love doesn't follow should's, child. It simply is." One night, unable to sleep, Eleanor sat in the kitchen, a cup of chamomile tea growing cold before her. The sound of approaching hoofbeats sent her heart into her throat until she recognized Quinn's distinctive whistle, a signal to his men that all was well. He came in through the back door, looking weary but alert. He stopped short when he saw her. "You should be asleep." "I couldn't." She pushed a chair out with her foot. "Sit. I'll make you something to eat." Quinn sank into the chair, removing his hat and running a hand through his hair. "No need." "I'm not hungry." "When did you last eat?" When he didn't answer, Eleanor rose to slice bread and cheese. "That's what I thought." As she placed the simple meal before him, their hands brushed. Quinn caught her wrist gently, looking up at her with an expression that made her breath catch. "I've been thinking about our interrupted conversation," he said quietly. "So have I." He tugged lightly on her wrist, urging her closer. "Eleanor Adams, when I said you were free to go or stay, I never imagined how much I would come to hope you'd stay." "Quinn, not as my housekeeper," he continued. "Not as my employee, but as my partner, my wife, if you'll have me." Eleanor stared at him, scarcely believing what she was hearing. "Are you certain I'm not? I'm not what most men want." Quinn stood, keeping her hand in his. "I've never been more certain of anything. You're exactly what I want, your strength, your intelligence, your compassion." His free hand came up to cup her cheek. "Your beauty." "I'm not beautiful," she whispered. "You are to me," he said with such conviction that she almost believed him. "Eleanor, I love you, not in spite of who you are, but because of it." Tears welled in her eyes. "I love you too, I have for months." Quinn's smile transformed his face, erasing the weariness and worry. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, he lowered his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, a question rather than a demand. When Eleanor responded, sliding her arms around his neck, it deepened into something more urgent, years of loneliness and restraint melting away in the warmth of newfound love. When they finally parted, both breathless, Quinn rested his forehead against hers. "Is that a yes?" "Yes," Eleanor laughed through her tears. "Yes, I'll be your wife." 3 days later, the rustlers were caught by a posse from Yuma. The threat removed, life at the ranch gradually returned to normal, or a new normal, with Quinn and Eleanor's relationship now open and acknowledged. Their engagement raised eyebrows among some of Quinn's business associates, but the ranch hands who had come to respect Eleanor's capabilities seemed unsurprised by the development. "About time," Pedro commented when Quinn announced their intention to marry. "The betting pool was getting too large to manage." "You were betting on us?" Eleanor asked, mortified. "Si, senora, since Christmas. I just won $20, Quinn laughed, pulling Eleanor closer to his side. "At least someone profited from my caution." They wrote to Eleanor's father, inviting him to the wedding planned for midsummer. His reply came promptly, joy at their news and acceptance of the invitation, along with a confession that he had hoped for this outcome when he agreed to Fletcher's outrageous proposal. "He claims he saw how you looked at me the few times we crossed paths in town," Quinn told her, bemused. "Says he thought we might suit each other if given the chance. So my father manipulated us both." Eleanor wasn't sure whether to be angry or impressed. "Not entirely," Quinn clarified. "The debt was real enough, but he apparently suggested me specifically to Fletcher when the loan shark came calling. He shook his head. Your father is either very shrewd or very fortunate. Or he simply knows his daughter better than she knows herself, Eleanor mused. As their wedding day approached, the railroad company announced its decision. The northern route had been selected. Quinn's land investment had paid off magnificently, multiplying his worth considerably overnight. We can build that new house now, he told Eleanor. Anything you want. But Eleanor had other ideas. I'd rather use some of that money to start a school, she suggested. There are ranch children for miles around with no proper education. We could hire a teacher, provide books. Quinn looked at her with undisguised admiration. I married a visionary. Not yet, you haven't, she reminded him. But yes, you will. The wedding took place on a perfect July day, with the desert in bloom around them. They married under an arbor built by the ranch hands, with Eleanor's father giving her away and Mrs. Thornton dabbing at tears she later denied shedding. Eleanor wore a dress of ivory silk that she'd insisted on making herself, designed to flatter rather than disguise her figure. Quinn couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked toward him, his expression one of wonder and devotion. You are the most beautiful bride I've ever seen, he whispered as she reached him. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, promises of love and fidelity exchanged before friends and family. When the circuit preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Quinn kissed her with a tenderness that brought fresh tears to Eleanor's eyes. The celebration lasted well into the night, with food and dancing and more than a few emotional toasts. When they finally retreated to the main house now, their house Quinn swept Eleanor into his arms to carry her over the threshold. I can walk, you know, she protested, even as she wrapped her arms around his neck. I'm hardly light as a feather. You're perfect, Quinn said firmly, kicking the door closed behind them. And you're mine as I am yours. Later, as they lay together in the darkness, limbs entwined and hearts beating in unison, Eleanor marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. From a desperate arrangement to true love, from captivity to freedom chosen freely. What are you thinking? Quinn murmured against her hair. That when you told me I was free to go or stay, you gave me the greatest gift possible choice. He raised himself on one elbow to look down at her. And you chose me. I chose us, she corrected. And I would choose us again every day for the rest of my life. 5 years later, the Blackett Ranch had grown into one of the most prosperous in the Arizona Territory. The railroad had transformed Yuma from a dusty outpost to a thriving community, and Quinn's investments had multiplied several times over. But his greatest joy was not his business success, but the family he and Eleanor had created. Their school now served over 40 children from surrounding ranches, with 2 full-time teachers and a library that was Eleanor's pride and joy. And in the expanded ranch house, they had compromised, keeping the original structure but adding new wings. Their own children filled the rooms with laughter. 3-year-old James and 1-year-old Margaret, both with their father's blue eyes and their mother's quick intelligence. Eleanor herself had blossomed in ways she had never imagined possible. No longer defined by her size or her father's circumstances, she had become a respected figure in the community, managing the school and much of the ranch's business, while Quinn focused on expanding their cattle operation. Her father had moved to Yuma permanently, reopening his store with Quinn's backing. It was now a thriving enterprise, benefiting from the town's growth and his partnership with his son-in-law. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Quinn surprised Eleanor with a gift, the deed to the parcel of land where they had first acknowledged their feelings for each other. I've had a small house built there, he told her. Nothing fancy, just a place where we can escape when we need time alone. With two small children, that may be the most romantic gift possible, Eleanor laughed, kissing him gratefully. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, their children asleep inside, Quinn took her hand in his. "Do you ever regret it, staying that day?" Eleanor looked at him, this man who had seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself, who had given her freedom and then won her heart. "Never, not for a single moment. Nor I," Quinn said, raising her hand to his lips. "That day, when Fletcher brought you here, I thought I was simply righting a wrong, preventing someone else from being treated as property. I never imagined I was meeting the woman who would change my life." "We changed each other's lives," Eleanor corrected gently. "You gave me the chance to discover who I could be when I wasn't defined by others' judgments." Quinn nodded. "And you taught me that the past doesn't have to determine the future, that love is worth the risk of loss." As darkness fell over the desert, they remained on the porch, hands clasped, hearts full. From a desperate arrangement had come a love neither had expected but both had embraced, proving that sometimes the greatest journeys begin with the simplest of choices: to stay.